All right, what is up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of When Nature Strikes. I'm your host, Bryan, and I'm back live again. I have a different studio set up, so I'm trying it out for tonight. Every Thursday night, tune in if you're into hurricanes, storms, tornadoes, natural disasters, whatever it may be. Every Thursday, I'm usually going to cover what's coming out on Friday with my new episodes. So tonight, as you can see, my episode is on Hurricane Helene, which was a super deadly hurricane in 2022, mostly because of the speed it was moving at and the amount of rain that fell during the storm. And the reason the amount of rain was so high is because the speed of the storm was so slow. So I'm just going to wait about 30 seconds here and I'm going to get going on with this episode. If you are here, please hit the like and subscribe button. You'd be doing me a favor. I greatly appreciate that. You don't have to. No one's forcing you to. But I definitely appreciate you being here. So we'll just wait about 20 more seconds and we will start tonight's live episode. Thanks for joining. Okay, welcome to the episode. Thank you for joining me on this information session of When Nature Strikes. This information session is on the 2022 Hurricane Helene. This was one of the most powerful and destructive storms to impact the southeastern United States in recent memory. Tonight, the different topics that we're going to look at covering is how Helene formed, the path that it took, how meteorologists tracked it. So usually they have to predict if you go to the National Hurricane Center, they usually can predict in the next week where hurricanes are most likely to travel to, where hurricanes are most likely to form, and who's in the danger path, who should be thinking about being prepared and evacuating. So that's also another topic. And also we're going to look at some of the widespread damage that it caused across Florida and the Carolinas. Now, we'll wrap that up with statistics just on the overall storm itself. So probably the amount of damage in US dollars. We're going to look at the death toll, unfortunately. We're going to look at power outages, how much power went out to how many people. We're going to look at what it's taught us about preparation, resilience, and the growing strength of natural disasters and the way that we can be better prepared for storms in the future so the damage is less and less. So let's look at the formation of Helene. So Hurricane Helene, when it made landfall in Florida, it was a Category 4 storm. So let's just have a look here. There's the well-defined eye of the storm when it made landfall in Florida. Obviously, you can imagine the amount of ocean water that this brought in was incredible. We'll look at storm surge numbers as well in a little bit. The damage, of course, is mostly brought by the storm surge, the wind, and the rainfall with these storms. This started out as a fast-tracking storm, and then it eventually slowed down to, I believe it was like a record of 1 mile per hour. So the slowest moving hurricane that you could imagine, dumping tons of rain, but this was mostly over the Carolinas. So it kind of zipped through Florida, went through Georgia, and kind of just sat over the Carolinas. So let's go to our next slide. So here is our rainfall total amounts when we're talking about North Carolina, South Carolina. You're seeing rain amounts up to 41.5 inches, 45.2 here, 15.4. This is tons and tons of rain, and this is where you're going to see most of the damage when it comes to flooding and people trying to survive in these storms, because the height of the water just goes way too high for you to hide out in your homes. And where's the only place you can probably go to? Unfortunately, it's to the attic or it's on top of your roof. And the power of water usually can take out homes. The power and the weight of everything else that's being swept with it can usually take out homes as well. So hurricanes are super dangerous, and Hurricane Helene definitely proved that. So let's look at the overall path of where this storm actually took. Let's check it out, the path here. So we have The overall storm path, okay, we can see it form south of the Gulf of Mexico, usually just as a low pressure system. Not much is going on. Usually it's like a tropical wave is what they'll call it. Most times it drifts west from Africa, on the west coast of Africa. But this time we see it forms, and it hasn't happened this year at all. I think we've had quite a long hurricane season of nothing going on. But this is usually your path you'll see if something's going to head into the Gulf of Mexico. So down here near Cuba, we have a tropical depression that forms, which leads into a tropical storm and into a full-out hurricane. And you can see as it approaches the Gulf of Mexico, we go from Category 1, Category 2, 3, and it actually strengthens to a 4 right before it hits Florida. Okay, and you can tell it just misses Jacksonville. The eye of the storm went right through. And the full track of the storm here stops pretty much over North Carolina and South Carolina. It just dumps rain and rain and rain, and then it eventually just fades out. But this was a very dangerous storm. So let's have a look at what the National Hurricane Center saw when they were going through the storm. So when it first popped up, it was a Wednesday, so they only had a couple days notice. So that when you only have a couple days notice with a storm like this, usually that means that the storm is moving pretty quickly. And that can be a good thing, but it can also be a very bad thing, because as storms move quicker, they gain more power, more intensity. They call it rapid intensification. And as it moves quicker and quicker, it'll bring more water, more wind, more water vapor. And you can see that the hurricane warning was issued right here in Florida, the northwest part of Florida. And that's where they had the hurricane warnings. The tropical storm warnings were in other parts of Florida as well. Okay, so you can see they were still going to get the effects, not the full out effects like where the actual hurricane was projected to go. And over Georgia and South Carolina, parts of North Carolina, we see that there was just a tropical storm warning. So that means have your eye on the storm. Not 100% certainty that it's going to go there, but you can probably expect some kind of wind, rain, or some kind of effect from the storm. Okay, so if we have a look at, this is just a more in-depth picture of the eye of the hurricane, and you can see the stronger and the more visible that eye of the hurricane is, the stronger the storm is going to be. And you can imagine that this one came with full intensity, just shy of a Category 5 hurricane, but it brought the ocean waters in and it dumped tons of rain, and the wind was incredible during the storm. And if you just look at the pictures here from the flooding in Florida, you can see that the water was up pretty high. The amount of damage was incredible, and there's not much you can really do about that. So the predicted cone of uncertainty obviously had it aimed right at Florida, and we see the actual track. So I'm going to go back here to the actual track of Helene right there. And let me just see if we got this right. Okay, so we see the actual track of Helene. After making landfall along the Florida Gulf Coast, Helene maintained significant strength as it moved inland. So it stayed as a Category 4. Usually as soon as it hits land, we see the eye start to dissipate. It breaks up a bit, keeps doing its rotation. Okay, lots of tornadoes usually involved with hurricanes, but usually they start to lose their strength and energy, right? Because they're not over the warm waters anymore. It brought intense winds, heavy rain, and numerous tornadoes, like I said, through Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Major cities and rural areas alike faced widespread power outages, infrastructure damages, so roads, everything you could think of that helps run a city was destroyed, and flash flooding. So let's have a look here at our slideshow. Okay, back to the radar shot of the eye, the flooding, more flooding damage. You can see that these are all the boats that are being brought inland, probably docked somewhere, and the water just rises up and shoots them on land. So there's not much else place they can go. Let's see here. The total rainfall amounts went, and we kind of went over this back on slide 3. Total rainfall amounts. Florida and Georgia themselves. So I'll just go back to the picture of Florida and Georgia here, and I'll use the eye of the hurricane picture here. So total rainfall amounts in Florida and Georgia between 8 and 12 inches of rain. And where I'm from in Canada, here in Ontario, usually if we get an inch of rain, like that's a pretty good amount of rain, and we consider that pretty bad. So we're looking at 8 to 12 inches of rain, while some parts of western North Carolina saw up to 18 inches or more. These incredible rainfall totals led to devastating flash floods, river overflows, obviously, because they can only handle so much water, and landslides in mountainous regions. Okay, and that's deadly, and hopefully no one's out and about, and hopefully no one's in the path of where those mudslides actually go to. Hopefully there's no homes, because the power and force behind mudslides just knocks down houses and does tons and tons of damage. So when we're looking at the total damages in Florida, see if I can, and these are just a couple more pictures of what it was like in Florida. We can just see water, wind, storm surge, just relentless when it comes to damage. The winds overall were over 120 miles per hour, and they tore through the coastal communities, obviously, because that's where the ocean water is. That's where the wind is strongest when it first makes landfall. Storm surges were up to 8 to 12 feet. So here I have a quick shot of what our storm surge was coming off the ocean. Apalachicola here, 10 to 15 feet. Steinhatchee here was 10 to 15 feet. Crystal River kind of on that border between 8 to 10 feet. And we see Sarasota, Fort Myers, Naples, and Flamingo had the 3 to 5. So even though they didn't take the brunt force of the hurricane, they're still feeling 3 to 5 feet of storm surge. And when you're a coastal community, just a few feet of water with the amount of wind behind it can cause tons and tons of damage. So it's actually quite incredible that's what happened here. Let's go back to damage pictures. This is a good picture here. This just shows you the force of the water itself, and with tons and tons of rain, there's not much you can do about it. So the water pushed inland, flooding roads and destroying tons of homes. Thousands of trees were uprooted. The trees don't stand a chance. Power lines obviously snapped, and millions of people were left without electricity. Entire neighborhoods near the coast were left unrecognizable. We've seen this time and time again. My parents were recently, a couple years ago, in Fort Myers when Hurricane Ian made landfall, and that was a Category 4. And if you live in anywhere near that area, you're well aware of that hurricane. You're well aware of the damage it caused, and you're well aware that Fort Myers pretty much took the eye of that hurricane, and they're rebuilding. And I think they're still rebuilding today because of the amount of damage it does. And it just takes everything inland. Boats, buildings, power lines, vehicles, boats, everything you could think of. I probably said that. But the amount of damage it just does, and it brings it miles and miles inland, which is just the most destructive part. And then trying to clean that up and rebuild on top of that without something else coming to get you. So it's really tough. So like I said, entire neighborhoods were left unrecognizable, and wind and water combined to create catastrophic damage. So that was in Florida. Let's move our way towards the Carolinas. Let's just go here. Just another picture of Florida. Okay, now we're at the Carolinas. And you can see, and it might make you question, why would the water be so high here in the Carolinas, even though Florida was closer, obviously, to the ocean, and the water they probably didn't see as much flooding as they did in the Carolinas. And that is because this storm here slowed down to a speed of about 1 mile per hour. If you can picture what that looks like, the storm is pretty much not moving at all. So just imagine a storm sitting on top of your city, town, wherever you live, and it's just sitting over it, and it's just dumping rain and rain and rain, and it's not going anywhere. Okay, usually when we have storms, they pass through. Usually they got some speed too, especially if it's like a cold front, and they just pass through, and we see that the temperature changes. Obviously, it's going to drop for the most part, and it goes through, and then all of a sudden it's sunny. This storm sat over North Carolina for quite a long time. Let's have a look at the timeline again. I believe I had it on slide number 4 here. It was at September 27th, 2022. the storm went to a tropical storm, and it doesn't actually have a full timeline here, but I'm pretty sure it sat over the Carolinas for a day or two, and that's just steady. And if you just think about steady rain for 1 or 2 days and hurricane rain, like that's a lot of rain that it's going to dump on top of where you live. So let me just go back to the Carolinas. Okay, so here we go. Damage in the Carolinas. And here's another picture here. And you can see there's some mountainous regions in the background. Possible mudslides there, which is super dangerous, especially if you get in the way of something like that. Super, super dangerous, but that's okay. I'm sure the people that live in Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, all those places, Texas, you're used to getting hit by hurricanes, and I feel like if there was something predicted to come your way, that you would hopefully make the right decision too. And if you board up, that's fine, but at least don't stay where you live because it's just too dangerous. And these are probably close to lakes and rivers. And when these lakes and rivers overflow with the amount of water and wind sitting on top of it, you can clearly tell that it will do some damage. So I'm sure that's exactly what happened. So let's continue on. As Helene moved north, it unleashed its power on the Carolinas. Western North Carolina experienced record-breaking flooding, with rivers swelling, obviously, like I just said there, beyond their banks, and entire towns were submerged in water. So that's a good example here in this picture that you see. Obviously the water level's gone down. It's probably been a little time since the storm went through, but you can imagine that water going up 8 to 10 feet, maybe. I'm not sure how high, but even a few feet of water going through is enough to cause a lot of damage. The hilly and mountainous terrain made matters worse, causing landslides that destroyed roads and isolated communities, because once your roads are blocked off, you can't really go anywhere. Cities like Charlotte and Greenville faced widespread power outages, infrastructure failures, and long cleanup efforts. Tons of cleanup, and this is through the whole southeastern United States where this hurricane made its impact. It became clear that Helene's impact would take months, even years, to recover from, and that's typically the case with these hurricanes. So let's just have a look here. You can see the infrastructure damage here. Okay, we got overpasses, underwater, things give out, right? The weight of water, the force of water, it destroys everything. Even in your homes, when you have flooding, you're well aware that if there's water in your house, it's doing damage somewhere. Okay, water is not a good thing in your house. So I'm going to leave that picture up there, and we are going to go through the statistics of the storm that define Hurricane Helene's strength and impact. So the name was Hurricane Helene. The dates that it was active. So it was active from September 25th to, I believe it was the 28th or 9th of September. And then it became a low pressure system and it kind of just faded out. The category at its peak. So if we go back, you guys could see that this was a category 4 when it made landfall. Where am I here? Yeah, right here. So it made landfall as a category 4. And like I said, the well-defined eye shows that it was not a storm that was falling apart. It was gaining strength. It was, you could just tell by looking at its characteristics there. It's a well-defined eye. Let's go back to our statistics. The lowest pressure recorded was approximately 940 millibars, which makes it a pretty strong storm. Maximum rainfall was up to 18 inches in parts of the Carolinas. That's just the rainfall, but when it all comes together, it's devastating. The storm surge was 10 to 12 feet. So let's go back. Okay, 10 to 12 feet recorded. Some spots up to 15 feet were recorded as well. Okay, so just depended on where you lived and how far you were away from the actual hurricane eye or storm itself. Okay, so let's go back. The estimated fatalities, dozens reported across multiple states, and that's actually a pretty low number, which means a lot of people, I would assume, left where they lived and headed further inland for safety's sake. And that's a really good thing to do. It's smart when your life matters. Okay, you need to take care of yourself and your family and friends and make sure that you're in good hands. The estimated damage was tens of billions of dollars, and the most impacted areas were northern Florida, southern Georgia, and western Carolina. These statistics help us measure the storm's scale, but behind every number is a community, a family, and a story of survival. Okay, so let's go back here. And if you have been with me, I appreciate you watching again. I understand that you don't have to be here, but if you got the notification, if you do follow and you are a subscriber to my channel, I do appreciate you being here. You don't have to be. But I assume if you've subscribed to my channel that you have interest somewhat in storms. I enjoy doing this as well. That's why I'm here. I like doing this weekly. I just took a little time off recently just with the way things were going. And I just needed a little time to just take a break and get back into the groove of things. I feel like I'm in a good spot now. So I've got a new studio set up and I'm doing these live videos now, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I appreciate you being here. So Hurricane Helene reminded us that nature is both powerful and unpredictable. Even with modern forecasting and technology, we can't always know exactly where a hurricane will go or what will actually happen. But it's better to be prepared, informed, and support one another. Okay? It's good to just be prepared for anything. Okay? It doesn't even matter if it's a hurricane. Be prepared. Helene showed us how quick conditions can change and how essential it is for communities to have an emergency plan and communication systems in place. It also showed the strength of people. Neighbors helping neighbors. First responders risking their lives with cleanup and helping maybe find or rescue other people that were affected by this storm. And they also helped rebuild from nothing. Each storm teaches us something new about resilience and adaptation. Resilience is the power to overcome losses, great losses, whether it's family, whether it's your home, whether it's everything you had. It's your ability to come together as a community and fight back to get back to where you were. Now, when it comes to adaptations, I would hope that people would maybe look at building codes and maybe strengthen those up a little bit so you're more prepared for hurricanes. Because if you live in these hurricane-prone areas, like the Gulf of Mexico is always a hot spot, you know that there's always a chance of a hurricane coming through. So the lesson, I think, is pretty clear. Respect the power of nature, prepare early, and never underestimate the power of the force of hurricanes. Okay, before we wrap up, I just want to share a quick announcement. Tomorrow on When Nature Strikes, I have an episode of Hurricane Helene coming out. So if you like the dramatic storytelling, survivor recounts, and a deeper analysis of the storm's aftermath, tune in tomorrow at noon. That's Eastern time. In addition, I'll be going live now several times a week because I like doing these information sessions. I think they're quite interesting. If you like storms, feel free to drop in, hit the subscribe, hit the like. Feel free to throw some questions in the chat. I will answer them. And you can also answer questions for me, or it can be like a group chat and we can kind of go through different storms together. I'll also take suggestions of different storms that I could cover in the future. If you haven't seen my page already, have a look at it. We'll do several information sessions on hurricanes, tornadoes, and other major weather events that are occurring or have occurred. And we'll dive into how these storms form and how we can stay safe and what we can learn from each of these events. If you're interested in weather, natural disasters, or storytelling through science, be sure to tune in, join the discussion, and stay informed. Thank you all for being here today, and remember, knowledge and preparation saves lives. Thanks for coming, have a good night, and enjoy the episode tomorrow.